Stanford University.
Okay, welcome to Stanford CS 193P, Developing Applications for iOS. This is winter of 2017. This is lecture number 11. And today we're going to do one gigantic demo. Last time I made you suffer through basically doing all slides. Now you get to enjoy all demo for the whole time. And it's all going to be about core data and applying all the things that we learned in the last lecture into a demo. And I won't be coming back to the slides. So let me just give you a heads up of what's happening here. On Friday, we have this other database mechanism for storing data in iCloud. I highly recommend this one at our Friday section, normal place and time. Monday's a holiday, so don't show up here on Monday because I won't be here. And then next Wednesday, I'll be going over the final project requirements, including the rubric, and also we'll be doing the topic auto layout. Now your assignment 5 has been posted already, and it's due 1 week from today before lecture. All right, so let's hop into our demo here. So what we're going to do, here's what we had smash tag from last week. Remember, we have this one MVC. We type in a search thing, hashtag Stanford or whatever, and it pulls down a bunch of tweets. Now, we're just going to add another MVC, a core data driven MVC. And when this MVC is going to show all the Twitter users who tweeted all the tweets that are showing in this MVC right here. So if you type a certain search term like hashtag Stanford gets a bunch of tweets, and then there's going to be a button on this MVC. We're going to put it up in the title bar. I'm going to show you how to do that as well. And you're going to click that button. It's going to bring a new MVC with all the users, and we'll also put in there how many tweets they tweeted. And we're only going to be looking, when we do that, at the tweets that are in this result, this search result right here, or that have ever come from typing this search term. All right, so this is all going to be core data. So we need core data in our app. When we built smash tag, we didn't click use core data. So we're going to have to go through the procedures that I talked about last time for adding core data to our app. And we're going to do that by creating a dummy app right here. Let's go to new project. So we're going to create a dummy project. You can call this project anything you want. I'm going to call it foo. Just make sure that use core data is clicked right there. All right, we can put it anywhere we want because we're just going to turn around and delete it in a moment. And you can see that it's created this dummy project, and all we're really interested in here is the code from the app delegate that does core data. You can see that this app delegate imports core data. Now we haven't talked about the app delegate, and we will. It's part of the application lifecycle. But for now, all we need to know is we're going to go down here and get this stuff for core data. You recognize this from the slides. And notice also this application will terminate calls save context. Save context is one of the core data methods that you get for free here. So I'm actually going to select that as well as all the rest of this stuff. It's marked core data right there. And I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to close this project because I don't need it. And I'm going to go over to the app delegate in my smash tag right here, and you can see it doesn't import core data right there at the top, nor does application will terminate call save context, nor does it have any of the other stuff down there. So I'm just going to take that code and paste it in here. And this code is generic. It works in all applications. The only thing that's specific about it is this string right here, which tells you the data model, the thing that describes the schema of your object-oriented database. Now you notice we have an error right here. That's because it doesn't recognize NS persistent container. Because NS persistent container is in a different framework than UIKit, it's in core data. So every time you're using core data in a Swift file, you need to import core data or it won't recognize NS managed object or any of the other symbols from core data. So that's one thing we have to do that use core data button did. The other one is actually create the data model itself. And that we do with file, new file. So I'm going to go file, new file. And normally we're picking things up here, but we're going to scroll down to where it says core data and pick data model. Okay, so we don't want mapping model, we want data model. And this is just going to be that thing where we describe all our entities and attributes. And we can call it anything we want, just to be kind of different. I'm going to call it Smash. That's going to be the name of my data model. And I'm not going to put it in supporting files. I'm going to put it at smash tag and higher this level up here. And click create. And here it is. You probably recognize this, right? These are our entities and attributes. We haven't put any of them in there. Now, since I called this smash and not foo, I have to go back to my app delegate and change this foo string in here to be smash. So I've pretty much now reproduced everything that the use core data button would do. The only difference would be the use core data would have called my XC model D file. It would have called it smash tag because that's the name of my app, but I like to call it smash. All right, so now that we have this nice data model file, let's go ahead and create our schema. Now I'm going to do this really quick because I already showed you how to do all this, but you can just watch it happening real fast. I'm not going to show you anything that I didn't show you in the last lecture. I'm going to start by adding an entity down here at the bottom. All right, so this entity, I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to do tweets and Twitter users because I'm going to have that table that's full of Twitter users, but obviously those Twitter users are determined by a bunch of tweets. So those are the two entities I need. So let's put tweet here first, and we'll add attributes for the tweet. I'm going to add them by clicking this little plus right here. So we have the text attribute, which is a string. We have, our tweets. What if we search for hashtag Stanford twice in a row? We might get the same tweet back. And we want our database to have unique tweets. We don't want to, every time we search, we're getting more and more of the same tweet in there. So I need some sort of unique attribute in my database, which is going to be a string. Luckily, the Twitter info that comes in the Twitter framework, it has a unique identifier in there for tweets, so it'll be really easy to set that. And I'm not going to use this, but for example, if I wanted a created attribute, it would be a date. I would just click date. I'm putting this in here because I just want to show you what it's like to set a date in code. It's a little slightly tricky. So I'm going to add another, actually we could look here in the editor style, right? So this is the exact same thing here in the editor style. When you're in editor style, you're almost always going to have your inspector open right here so that you can click on things and change their types and things like that. I'm going to create another entity here, and it's going to be our Twitter user. I'm going to call that Twitter user. And notice when I move these around, it moves it around the other, whatever other entities there are, and I'm going to be connecting these two and creating a relationship, and you're going to see it's going to keep drawing it as we draw there. So let's add some attributes here. So I'm going to click Add Attribute, and oops, sorry, put it on the tweet one there. Don't want that. Sorry. It's not deleting that. Let's go back to editor style here. Not sure why that didn't do that. Look at the attribute, delete that. By the way, I do notice sometimes that when selecting things, it's not always that great. It doesn't do that great a job. I'm not sure what it is about the data modeler that makes it that way, but you'll click on something, and it's like, it doesn't click that thing. It clicked the entity or something else. So there's an example where I was clicking on that attribute, but it wouldn't let me delete it. Here I have Twitter user chosen. Hopefully add attribute. Yes, it adds it to the Twitter user. The only attributes I'm going to have in my Twitter user are the handle. That's your @ whatever. And then your name. And those are both going to be strings. So we'll go over here and make this be type string. And we'll also make the handle be type string. All right. So that's it for the attributes. And the only thing we have left to do is the relationship between these two. And I'm going to hold down Control and drag between the two right here. And you see it creates that relationship, calls it new relationship on both sides. But we don't want that. The Twitter user here, this relationship is the tweets that this Twitter user has tweeted. And for the tweet, this relationship is the tweeter, okay, the person who tweeted it. This tweets relationship right here we know is a too many relationship because a Twitter user can have multiple tweets, right? So that's why we get the little double arrow there. All right, that's our entire data model that we need now. For your homework assignment, you're going to need more things in here, okay? This is not going to be sufficient to the task, so you're going to have to add some more stuff. But for ours, our simple example, this is all we need. Now, we know that we want to access all this stuff not using value for key and set value for key. We want to have subclasses, a subclass called Twitter user and a subclass called tweet, and we want them to have the vars for all of these attributes and relationships. And so we need that code to be generated. And the way we do that is we just select the entity. You see I've selected tweet right here, entity tweet. And you go down here to code gen, and this says by default class definition. That means that it's done it. It has generated a class called tweet, and it's going to work with all the vars in relationship. But that's not actually what we want. We want to pick this one, where it only creates an extension to tweet that adds the vars stuff. That's because we want to write the class tweet and be able to put our own code in there. It's very common to when we write the class yourself, the main class, but you still want the var magic, so you want those extensions in there. Another thing that I didn't really mention in lecture, and really I don't think really matters unless you're in a workspace like we are, you know, we have Twitter and Smashtag and Workspace, is this module name right here. If you don't have anything in here, then it's going to use a global namespace for these classes like tweet, so it's going to call the class tweet. But actually, we already have a twitter.tweet, and now we're going to have smashtag.tweet. So we want to change this to be current product module. So don't forget this. If you forget this, alert, alert, wake up if you're not paying attention. If you don't put this right here, you're likely to get tons of errors. Okay, all kinds of conflicting class names, and even if your app builds, it won't run. Terrible things will happen, so you definitely want to do this. I don't believe you need to do this if you're not in a workspace. I think if you just have an app by itself, you can leave that unset and it'll work fine. All right, so we did that for tweet right here. So let's do it now for Twitter user. Twitter user is defaulted class definition. I want that to be extension also, and of course I want current product module there. All right, so that's all we need to do. And behind the scenes, Xcode has furiously written out this extension to make the vars work. But we have said that we're going to write the class, so let's do that. Let's create the class for Twitter user and for tweet. So we're going to go to File, New, File. It's just how we create any class. It's no different than any other class we've created, Cocoa Touch class. It's not a table view controller. It's an NS managed object. So we go down here. It's in somewhat alphabetical order. So where is it here? NS managed object. Okay, we know that Twitter user and tweet are represented in the database as NS managed objects or subclasses thereof, which we're creating. So we'll create the tweet one first, and we hit next. Okay, it says where do you want to put it? Put it same place as everything else. And here it is. We know that we're going to have an error here immediately once this thing gets around to building that, and that's that NS managed object. It's not going to identify, it's not going to know what that is until we say import core data. Okay, so don't forget this little piece in your subclass. But now we can put anything we want inside these curly braces, and we're going to put a method in there. So let's do the same thing here for Twitter user. Twitter user. Okay, same, put everything in the same place. Here it is. Let's import core data. Okay, now, when you're first creating your model file and you choose that extension thing, and hopefully you remember to do current product model and all that stuff, the first time you build, and I'm going to build here, you might get some errors. We didn't get any of the kind of errors that you get from things being out of whack. But if things are out of whack, one thing you can do is go up to the product menu and clean. Just clean everything out. That'll cause Xcode to regenerate those extensions, for example. You can even hold down Option when you go to the product menu, and then clean build folder. And that will clean out all your derived data and rebuild absolutely everything. Okay? So those are options, and sometimes those are options just to do anytime something's kind of not really working right. Now, we do have some errors, though. Let's click and see what this error is right here. Okay, what is this saying? It's saying, cannot convert value tweet to specified value tweet. What? Can anyone see what might be the problem with this line of code right here? Yeah? Exactly. More candy throwing out there. Yes. Okay, this is saying tweet. It doesn't know which one we want. Twitter.tweet or the smashtag.tweet. Okay, so we have to, in Swift, fully specify which one we want. So this one is the Twitter.tweet. It's from our old code. Once we fix that, then now it knows what we're talking about, and all is well. Okay? All right. So now we've really got our core data stuff all ready to go. We've got the classes. We've got our data model explained, all that stuff. What we're going to do next is have our main MVC, sorry, where is this storyboard? I'm going to move the storyboard to the top since I clicked there a lot. We're going to have this main MVC right here. Every time it fetches tweets, we're going to have it put that tweet in the database, right? Once it loads up the database, then we can build this other MVC that will query the database. So this is going to be kind of the loading one. That's going to be the querying one. Now, I might be quite tempted to add this code to tweet table view controller.swift, right? Remember the thing we spent the last lecture doing all this wonderful stuff? Be an obvious place, for example, in search for tweets where I'm getting the tweets back. This would be an obvious place to load up the database. However, I don't want to do that here. And why don't I want to do that here? Because I have a perfectly good tweet table view controller here, an awesome MVC, very reusable. You give it a search term, it'll load up with tweets. I don't really want to pollute it and make it non-reusable by tying it to my data model here, by making it a core data thing, okay? So how do I resolve that conundrum where I want to keep this thing reusable, but I still need to put this stuff in the database? And the answer is I'm going to subclass this controller. Okay? I'm going to make another MVC that is going to inherit all the capabilities of this nice generic one and add the core data stuff. Okay? So I'm just going to go File, New File. Okay? Cocoa Touch class. I'm going to make it not a subclass of any iOS class, but a subclass of Tweet Table View Controller. This is my nice generic reusable one. I'm going to make it a subclass of that. I'm going to call it Smash Tweet Table View Controller, okay? Because it uses my Smash data model. All right, so I'm just going to create that. Here we go. Put it in the same place as all these other things. Here it is. I'm even going to just delete all this code out of here. I always do that just to make it clearer to you what I'm actually adding in these things. So I have this Smash Tweet Table View Controller, and I can go to my storyboard, for example, and select this controller and go to Identity, and instead of making it a Tweet Table View Controller, I'm going to make it a Smash Tweet Table View Controller. So now this is going to do all the things a Tweet Table View Controller does, plus anything I put in this subclass. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get all the way to designing our generic reusable one so that it was really nice and subclassable. Specifically, it'd be really hard to subclass search for tweets and then get inside here, this closure, and do something when these tweets happen. So I'm going to make my generic tweet table view controller a little more subclassable. What I'm going to do is take this code right here and make a little method out of it. Insert tweets, I'm going to call it. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new method called insert tweets that's going to do what that code I just cut out of there is. We'll put it up here. Func insert tweets. It's going to take some new tweets, which is going to be an array of twitter.tweet. Oops. All right, and it's going to have that same code in there. Obviously, I don't need this weak self business here because I'm not inside the closure here. And it's going to do it. Now, I'm going to leave this essentially internal. Remember, that's the default internal, which means it can be overridden or called. If I made that private, subclasses would not be able to override it. So anything that, unfortunately, there's nothing like protected in Swift where it's like subclassers can override it, but people can't call it. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as that. All right, so we have to leave this internal. But now I can take this method in my subclass here and override it. So I just put it here and say override, so that Swift knows that I'm overriding this thing. Then I'm going to let super do its work. And then I'm going to call a method on myself, update database with these tweets, with new tweets. All right? And that's going to update my database. So I'm going to have a private func here called update database, base with tweets. It's going to be twitter.tweet. Sorry, I keep hitting this side button right there. Okay, and that's just going to put these tweets into core data. And of course, it's complaining because import Twitter, and I've started using Twitter now. By the way, I might as well put it now, import core data, because this Smash Tweet Table View Controller obviously is going to be doing a lot of core data stuff as well. Okay, everyone see what I did there? just a subclass this, and I'm putting all my smash core data stuff into this subclass so that the superclass remains completely generic. Okay, I just had to make my superclass a little more subclassable or whatever. Now, as with any MVC, we want to think about the model of this smash tweet table view controller. Of course, it's going to inherit the model of its superclass, but I'm also going to add model here, which is the database to use. Okay, and I'm going to do it by passing in a persistent container. Now, normally we probably want this to be the app delegate view, the app delegate persistent container, but I want to allow people who are using my MVC to use any database they want. I don't want to force them to use that app delegate one. Having said that, I am going to have the default value of this go ahead and be that. So I'm going to say UI application.shared.delegate as app delegate dot persistent container. Okay, so that's just the default value, but this is a non-private var. Someone using this view controller could set the container and cause it to show things in a certain database. Okay, and that is essentially my model. My model is this database. All this class does, though, is write to the database. It's just updating the database. It doesn't, all its UI, it inherits from a superclass, which is non-database oriented. Okay, so how do we update this database? What do we need to do? Well, one thing is, I don't really want to update this thing on the main queue because, I don't know, my superclass might fetch 1,000 tweets. And do I really want to be blocking the main queue while I go write 1,000 tweets into my database? No way. So I'm going to take my container right here, and I'm going to ask it to perform something on a background thread, okay, a background queue. And you can see here's the argument. It's a closure, and it takes one argument. I double-clicked on it there. I'm going to use trailing closure syntax even. So just one argument right here. This is the managed object context for that other queue, the one that I'm allowed to use inside here, okay, in order to update my database. So I'm just going to use that context and put these tweets, these new tweets that I got right here, I'm going to put them in the database one by one. I'm just going to say for Twitter info in these tweets, and then add tweet. All right, so how do I do this piece of it? How do I add a tweet? And by tweet there, I mean the tweet in our data model. That's what I want to do, right? Add a tweet in our data model that matches this Twitter info that I got. All right, so we're going to put a method in tweet, in our subclass of tweet that we created right here that's currently empty. We're going to put a static method in there to either go out and find a tweet that matches that Twitter info or to create one if there's not one there. Okay, so that way they'll keep being unique, because if we get the same tweet, we'll find it and just return the one that's already there versus creating a new one. And so I'm going to call this thing, it's going to be static, or since this is a class, we could say class func find or create tweet matching Twitter info, and that's going to be a twitter.tweet. Okay, that's the info that's going to be passed into it. And I need to know what context to go look in. So I'm going to say in context, it's more space, MX managed object context, right there. And it's just going to return a tweet. So this static method, this class method, is just going to go and look in the database and find this thing. And if it can't find it, then it'll just create a new one. So we have to import Twitter, of course, because of this. And so how are we going to do this? Well, this method, pretty straightforward based on all you know in core data. First, I'm going to create a fetch request to go find this tweet. Okay, so let's do that. That's easy. How about let request equal, and remember I have to statically type this actually, so this is going to be an ns fetch request that fetches what? Tweets. So I'm going to use this nice tweet.fetchRequest method to get one. So that got me a fetch request that works on tweets. That's what I have there. And then I have to have a predicate for this. So I'm going to say the request predicate. And this is the thing that's going to say which tweets do you want in the database. So predicate here. And which tweets do we want? Well, we want tweets where the unique key Remember, the unique key is in our data model. I'll be going back to this data model often, but see, here's that unique key right there. We want to know when that unique key matches what the person passed in here, or the Twitter info they passed in. So that's %@, and that's Twitter info dot identifier. So it turns out identifier, that in our Twitter info dot tweet, that's a thing that's unique for all time for a tweet. Okay? It's always the same for the tweet. Even if you download it multiple times, it's always the same. Now, what about our sort predicate here, or sort descriptors, rather? Well, actually, we don't need any sort descriptors because this better match exactly 1 or 0. So you don't need to put 0 things or 1 thing in order. So you don't need a sort descriptor. And if you don't specify a sort descriptor, you get them back in random order. But again, we don't care what that is because it better be 0 or 1 or we got problems. So how do I fetch this thing? Very easy. I'm just going to say let the matches in the database equal context dot fetch this request. Now, the only thing about this is it throws, okay, because it might not be able to access the database, or it could be all kinds of problems, whatever. So I'm going to put this in a do catch here. So we'll do and put try here, and we'll put catch. We'll talk about what we're going to do when we catch an error there. All right, so we got the matches. So this matches. What's the type of this? Oh, we got an error here. What's some error? Context. Oh, sorry. Managed object context. Okay. So what is the type of this matches right here? Anyone want to guess? All right. Let's look. It's a array of tweet. Of course. I just fetched. I get it back in an array of tweet. Excellent. And it should be that the matches count. If it's greater than 0, then I found my tweet. And in fact, I can just return it. Return matches sub 0. Woohoo. Okay, so I found that unique tweet. I'm actually going to put an assert in here, though, that if the matches.count is greater than 1, then some kind of database inconsistency, because somehow in that unique field, there's more than one of them in there. So that would be bad. Maybe I would put the name of the method in here, tweet.that database inconsistency or something like that. So I'm putting a little assert. Now that should never happen. If I've written my code properly, it should never be possible for 2 tweets to get in there. It would have to be a bug somewhere else in my code. That's why I'm asserting here, because I want it to crash if that happens so that I notice it. Things aren't being duplicated without my knowledge. Now what about this catch right here? What if we try to do this fetch to get those tweets and it fails? Some problem with the database or something. What should we do in here? Well, we could fatal error and crash. That's what save context does, by the way, in the app delegate, just crash. We could look at the error and try and figure out what it is, things like that. But you know, I don't actually know what the person who's calling this find or create tweet wants me to do if there's a database error. I'm not sure. Do they want me to ignore it? Do they want me to crash? Do they want me to try again or something? What do they want? So when you don't really know what your caller wants to do, why not just rethrow the error? Okay? And when you rethrow, that means this method throws. Everyone understand what I did there? I made this method, find or create tweet, throw. And the only error it throws is it rethrows if this generates an error. Okay? So when we call this find or create tweet back in our other class, we're going to have to be careful because it throws now. So we have to use try. Okay? But if we get down here, then we made it past here without finding a match. So here's where we need to create the tweet. So I'm going to say let tweet equal, and how do we create a tweet? We just say tweet context context. So that creates a tweet in the database. Now I just set the tweets fields with setting the vars, like the tweets well, let's actually do the unique first. That's an important one. So that's Twitter info dot identifier. We've got to make sure we set that. If we don't set that, then we might start getting problems here because everybody's unique is going to be the same, 0 or blank and nil or something. How about the tweets text? Let's set that to the Twitter info dot text. Oh, here's created, tweet dot created. That's Twitter info, Twitter info dot created. And then we'll return the tweet. Okay, now this line right here is going to give us an error as soon as it catches up. And this error is kind of a weird one. It says, cannot assign a value of type date to type NSDate. And I mentioned on one of the slides from last time that in the database, dates are NS dates. But I also mentioned that you can automatically bridge a date to an NS date. And you can do that with as. So I can say as NS date. And that will always work. This as will always work as long as this is an NS date. Then this as will always work. It always can bridge across. So this is kind of unfortunate that you have to do this for your dates, but you do. Sorry. Okay, there's one more thing in tweet, though. What's the missing thing in tweet? Tweet.tweeter. I got to set my tweeter here. I just created this tweet. I got to set who the tweeter is. So to do the tweeter, I'm going to do this exact same method over in Twitter user. Okay, so that I can create a Twitter user in the exact same way. So we'll call it find or create Twitter user. I kind of pre-canned right here because you're not going to learn anything from me typing this, basically this exact same thing in again. I've got to import Twitter. Okay, but it's exactly the same. It's the same exact logic. I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm even rethrowing. Just creating the Twitter user if I can't find it. And for a Twitter user, its handle, the person's handle, @ whatever, is the unique identifier. All right? So now that we know how to create a Twitter user using that, I can say tweeter equals Twitter user. Find, or there it is, finally recognized it. Okay, find or create Twitter user, and we want to use the tweets user field. Whoops, Twitter. Lowercase, Twitter info.user, that's the user, and we'll do it in the same context, of course. Okay, now this throws, so we have to try this, and if it can't do it, I'm just going to fail again. Here, maybe I want to rethrow again, possibly, or I might even want to crash or something. I don't know. It's not clear to me, you know, what to do if I can't create the tweeter. If tweeter is something that that has to be set for a tweet to make any sense in the database, then I probably do want to rethrow or do something terrible here. But by just saying try, instead, I'm just giving up. Okay, I'm just not setting the tweeter. So there could be tweets that are created with no tweeter there. And what's it saying here? What did I do back here? Twitter user. Oh yeah, so Twitter user doesn't need to be an optional there. Sorry, I made that, accidentally had a question mark at the end there. So it's just going to return a Twitter user, and the try makes it into an optional Twitter user, which is okay because tweeter, this relationship, is an optional Twitter user. Okay, comes out of our data model. Everybody got that? Okay, so that's it. That's how we create a tweet. So we're going to use this method right here to put those tweets in the database. So let's go back to here. Let's go to our tweet, our Smash tweet table view controller. And here where we want to add the tweets, we'll just say let a tweet equal tweet.find or create tweet. We'll pass it the Twitter info. Right, that's this Twitter info right here that was passed to us in these tweets. And in context, we're going to use our containers context. Now, one thing here we want to be careful of is we don't want to, we're not using our containers context. We're using this context right here. Okay, so we use this little context right here. Now, of course, we know this thing throws right here. So we'll just do try question mark here. Because here I do know that when I'm updating the database, if I can't create that tweet, I'm just going to drop it. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just not collecting the data it needs to. There's really nothing I can do about it. Whatever the database error is, it's in there. Maybe I could report an error to the user and say, couldn't update database. But a lot of times the user are like, what the heck is that? Here, dropping it is probably fine. Now notice we have a warning here. See this warning? It says, oh, let tweet equals, and you never use tweet. And in fact, I don't want to use tweet. So what do you do in this case where you call it, I found and create this tweet, but I actually don't want it. I don't want to do anything. I just wanted it to get created if it wasn't there. Well, here you can say underbar. If you say underbar equals something, it means I'm ignoring the return value, which is fine. I don't need the return value. I just want this thing created in the database. It doesn't have to do anything. Okay, everybody following me so far here? So now we have loaded up the database. That's it. That's all the code we need to load our database up with all these tweets. Now, let's go ahead and print some database statistics here just to see if this is working before we go off and do our UI for our new MVC. So I'm going to say print database statistics, and I'm going to create a new private func here called print database statistics. Copy, paste. Okay, and what I want this thing to do is tell me how many tweets and how many Twitter users are in the database. That's all I want it to do here. So if I want to do anything in the database, if I want to look in the database, I obviously need a context. I have to have a context to, to look inside the database or whatever. So what context am I going to use here? I'm going to say if I can let context equal my containers view context, let's say. Now, the view context is the main queue context for this database. All right, so I'm going to have print database statistics. It's not inside this closure, so it's not going to use this context. We'll have it use the main view context. That's pretty much, unless you had it perform background tasks, it's pretty much the only context you have. So we'll have it do it on the main context. So how am I going to find out how many tweets there are? Okay, I'm going to create a request and do a fetch. So ns fetch request, and this one is a request for tweets. Okay, equals tweet dot fetch request. So now I got this request, the fetch request. I need no predicate here because I want all the tweets. Okay, if you have no predicate, that means give me them all. So that's what I want. And so now I'm just going to say here if I can let the tweet count equal trying to ask the context to fetch this request, okay, which it may or may not be able to do, but if it can, then, everyone understand what I did there? Then I'm going to get the count. Okay, so this, what's the type of that expression? Optional array of tweets. Because this returns an array of tweets if it doesn't throw, and this turns it into an optional. So this is an optional array of tweets. Here I'm optional chaining. So if that's not nil, then I get to continue and get the count. This is just arrays count. This is the method count in array, the var count in array. Okay, so now I got the tweet count. Now I'm just going to say print tweet count tweets. And that's it. That's how I fetch them all. Now, the only thing about this is kind of nasty. I just fetched every tweet in the entire database just to find out how many there were. Okay, well, what if there's 100,000 tweets in there? I'm really going to fetch, and now, of course, we know that it's only going to fault some of them in until I ask for the data, so it's not that bad, but there's a better way to do this. Okay. Oh, and by the way, here's another, before I show that. See this request? I made this separate variable right here. That's not actually necessary. I can just take this request right here and put it right in to here. Watch this. Cut, paste, and get rid of that. Okay, that's because the fetch method takes any kind of fetch request, right? It takes anything whose type is a fetch request result, basically, which is a protocol. And so I didn't have to create that other variable. And notice I don't have to statically type this because this will take anything that returns a fetch request or returns something. So anyway, so what's the better way to do counting right here is I'm going to say if let tweeter count, so I'll count the tweeters in this better way, equals try to get the context count for Twitter users, fetch request, okay, all Twitter users. Then I can print the tweeter count, Twitter users. Okay, so this method count is very much like fetch, but it doesn't, it still kind of is evaluating this fetch request. It's getting the same things. In this case, we're counting users. But it's really just asking the database, if I were to fetch this, how many would you give me? okay? So it's all done on the database side. Nothing actually has to get fetched. So it's just another method, count. But it does throw as well in the same way as fetch does, so we still have to do try. So this whole expression right here is an optional int. So I'm unwrapping it with if let and printing it out. Got all that? Okay, let's cross our fingers here that this all works, and we got all this database loading, and that we're going to print our database statistics, and it's all going to work. All right, here we go. This is just some junk from iOS there, so we'll ignore that. Right here. Let's search for something. Let's search for, how about hashtag Stanford? Well, let's do hashtag Stanford. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, wants to use my Twitter account? Sure, here it is. And, uh-oh, look on the console there. 0 tweets, 0 Twitter users. Well, maybe let's pull some more. No, it's still 0 tweets, 0 Twitter users. Well, it's not working. Anyone see anything in this code? This might be why this is not working. Yeah, we're doing a good job of loading up that database, but we never save it. So all that is just wasted time. We need to say try context save. Now again, I'm ignoring the error here. In a demo, a lot of times I use try ? Because I just don't have time to do the do, catch, and handle all the errors. That's something you should be looking at the documentation and doing. So here I'm just going to save and ignore any errors. All right, so that should fix it, right? Let's go see. All right, here we go. Hashtag Stanford. Oh, no. 0 tweets, 0 Twitter users. I put that save in there. What is going on? I'm going to pull again. Oh, look. I pulled, and it worked. What the heck is going on? When I first loaded up, it said 0 tweets, and then now it's saying 57. What is going? Something weird going on here. What's happening? Well, this is actually a multi-threading problem. Can anyone see the multi-threading problem here? No? Okay, I'm going to put some prints in so you can see it. So watch this. Print starting database load. And then down here, when I'm done with the save here, I'm going to print done loading database. Okay? So now let's run. All right. Hashtag Stanford. Oh, we got a crash there. Oh, database inconsistency. Interesting. So this is why we put these inserts in here. So let's see. Why do you think we have a database inconsistency here? Yeah? Oh, that's what it is. Yes, my assert is backwards there. I'm asserting here that matches.count equals 1. Good catch. So that's why that's crashing. Okay, good. Let's go back. Back to our stuff here. All right, now let's try again. Hashtag Stanford. Okay, let's see what's going on down here. Starting database load, it prints the statistics, and then it's done loading. That's bad. You see, it's not waiting for it to be done loading before it prints the statistics. You see? Now, why is that happening? Because we're putting print database statistic here after done loading. So why isn't it saying starting, done, and then printing? Because this right here happens on a different queue. Okay? So the way that this code goes is starting, this executes, returns immediately, because all it does is put this closure onto the background task queue. Then this happens. Then this closure starts running on that background queue, loads up these things, and it prints. Okay, do you see what's going on there? Everyone understand the multi-threading? So the way to make this work is to take print database statistics and put it inside here. Okay? Right? Because now it's not going to print the database statistics until it's done. Now, this has a problem, though. Okay? This is very bad. First of all, we're going to have to do, I'm not sure why it's not complaining here. Here we go. Now it is. It wants to know, it wants self dot here. So I'm going to do week self to break that memory cycle. Hopefully everyone understands that now, what's going on. Okay? But that's not the problem here. There's an even worse problem. And in the interest of time, I'm going to put a print down in here to show you something. If I'm going to check to see if this code is running on the main thread. So I'm going to say if, and the way you do that is you say thread.isMainThread. Okay, if I'm in the main thread, it will be true. So I'm going to say on main thread. And if it's not true, I'm going to say off main thread. Okay, so let's see if this statistics is happening on the main thread or not. I think many of you know which one it's going to be by looking at the code here. All right, here we go again. Hashtag Stanford. Here we go. Off main thread. Okay, why is it off the main thread? Because I called print database statistics inside this closure. It happens on a background thread. Thus, this entire method is happening off the main thread. Now, is that a problem? That's a huge problem. Because what context am I using here? The main queue context. View context is the main queue context. I cannot be using the main queue context off the main thread. You see the problem here? So it worked, but could have easily crashed or done something terrible. So how do we fix that? This is where we use that method I was telling you about in context called perform. I'm going to say context perform this code on your safe queue. Okay? When I say context perform, and I put this code in there, it says to that context, do this block, but whatever you do, do it on the right queue for you. And since this is the view context, it's going to be back on the main thread. Watch. Take Stanford. Okay, here we go. Back on main thread. Okay, so this perform right here is something that a lot of people would advise, always use it. Unless you're inside one of these where it's clear you're using this context in this background thing. Any other time, a lot of people would say always wrap your calls in this. That way you'll never have a problem where something's being executed on the wrong thread. Okay, the wrong queue. Understood all that? A little crash course in core data thread safety there. All right, so this is great. We got our database loading up. So we've got a database full of tweets. Now we want to add some UI to show all this data somehow. So let's go back to our storyboard and take a look at what we got here. And what kind of UI we're going to have? Like I said, I'm just going to have another MVC over here that I'm going to segue to with a little bar button item. Some of you figured out how to use a bar button item as part of your homework assignment, I think. But if you didn't, you're going to see today how to do it, and it's quite simple. So this new MVC that I'm going to segue to, let's go ahead and create an MVC for it. CocoaTouch class. It is just going to be a subclass of UI Table View Controller. I'm going to call it Smash Tweeters Table View Controller. So this is showing tweeters. Remember, this table is going to show all the tweeters who tweeted the tweets that are in the other MVC. All right, we'll put it not in the Twitter project, that's for sure. Let's put it down here. Okay, I always check this one here, or you end up with files all in random places. You don't want that. Okay, so here it is. Again, I'm going to delete all this stuff. See, it's a table view, so it's got all this UI table view stuff. We don't need any of this stuff, as you're going to see here. Okay, so this is our new table view controller. Let's go ahead and update our storyboard to segue to this thing. So we'll go over here. Let's create our bar button item to do the segue. So I'm going to search here for button. You never want to put a button in here. It'll look like it's working, but it's not right. Put a bar button in a bar. Okay? So we'll call this tweeters because that's what it shows. It shows the tweeters that tweeted all the tweets in this table. Let's get a table view controller out. Here it is. Let's change its identity. It wants to be a smash tweeters table view controller right there. Let's go ahead and segue from this. Control, drag, show segue. We're inside a navigation controller here. Let's set this segue identifier. We'll call this, I had a good name for this. Oh yes, tweeters mentioning search term, because that's what this segue does. It shows the tweeters that have mentioned this search term right here. Let's also have our little cell here be a subtitle cell. So we'll change that to subtitle. And we need a reuse identifier for this cell right here. We'll call this a Twitter user cell, because that's what it is. The Twitter user going to be shown in this cell right here. All right, so that's it. That's our entire UI. Super simple. All we need to do now is implement the guts of this controller right here. So let's go back to that. Here it is right here. Let's talk about the public API. I'm just really want to get in the habit of this. Every time we introduce a new MVC, let's talk about its public API. So this Smash Tweeters table view controller really has two parts in its model. One is it needs to know the mention, the search term that it's supposed to be showing the tweeters for. So I'm going to have, I'll call it mention, which is just a string. So that's part of its public model. And then what's the other part of its model? The database. Okay, it's supposed to look at what it does is look up in the database and find tweeters who mentioned this in their tweet. So it's got to have an NS persistent container here. By the way, some people, port core data, instead of having the database represented in the public model here as a container, they might just pass the context only. If they pass the context only here, though, you can't do any background stuff. So I like to pass the container here. Plus, this whole thing is a UI element. So it wants to use a view context, no other context, because it does its stuff all on the main queue. It's a UI. So it's nice when you pass a container because you're going to ask for its view context and you know you're getting a main queue context. Where if someone passes a context in here, could be not be a main queue context, that could be bad. Okay, so I think a container is a good wrapper when you want to tell an MVC, this is the database to use to do what you do. Okay, here it is. And sure, we'll do our little trick here where we make a default BUI application.share.delegate as an app delegate.persistent container. Okay, again, don't even have to do this, but we'll do it. Okay, so that's basically our model. And anytime our model changes, I'm going to have a did set here that updates my UI. Update UI. Okay, and we'll do the same thing. If I can select it, do the same thing with this guy right here. Okay, and so we need a private func to do that. Okay. So this is our model and its UI updating. Now, before I go implement this UI updating, because it's pretty straightforward, I'm going to go back to my Smash tweet table view controller, the one that's gathering all the statistics, because that's also the one I'm segueing from, right? This one right here, Smash tweet table view controller, I'm segueing from this to this using this button, so that's where the prepare needs to be. Okay, so I'm going to put the prepare in here for that. So let's put the prepare down at the bottom here. Prepare for segue. Here it is. Now, I'm going to go through this really fast because you guys surely know prepare for segue by now. I'm going to say if the segue's identifier is what I said, which is, and again, I should make a constant here, but for speed. So this is tweeters mentioning search term. That's what I called that segue. Then I'm going to get the destination. So that is a tweeters table view controller equals the segue's destination as a Smash tweeters table view controller. And yeah, I could probably do content view controller here because if I had that extension in here, because maybe I want to put this in a split view someday and et cetera, but for time I won't do that. So now I've got the tweeters TVC. Okay, this is my tweeters table view controller. I'm just going to set its public API, tweeters tvc.mention, mention equals my search term. Okay, this is the one where you type, this is the MVC where you type the text in, so it has search text. And then the tweeters tvc.container equals my container. I obviously want the tweeters MVC looking in the same database I'm looking in. So here I am actually setting this thing, right? Got an error here. What is it? Tweeters. Okay. All right. So I'm just setting my public model of my tweeters, not tweet, tweeters table view controller. Okay. Simple enough. All right. Now that we're all ready to segue to this nice Smash table view controller, how do we update its UI? How do we get it to look in core data, find the Twitter users that have tweeted something that matches this mention, and show it? Well, we're going to use NSFetched results controller, of course. That's the main deal here. And what are the pieces we need to do? This was the last slide from the last lecture. Hopefully you all remember it, because it was very recent. First thing is we need to have this table view controller be an NSFetched results controller delegate. Okay, if you're going to use a fetch results controller, your table view needs to be the delegate of that fetch result controller. And I told you I was going to help you out with that and provide that code, and sure enough I am. It's right here. I'm going to drag it in somewhere, copy it in, yes. All right. And let's take a look at it. Here it is, fetched results table view controller. You can see that it is a subclass of UI table view controller that implements the NSFetch results controller delegate protocol. So these are the methods right here in that protocol. There's 4 of them. And you can see that it is just using table view methods to update the table. Now these controller methods get called whenever the NSFetch results controller notices that the database changed in a way that would affect the NSFetch result. Okay? So this is the magic that makes your table automatically update when the database changes. You don't have to do anything. It just automatically updates. It's because of this delegate. Now for our thing to work, we need to be a subclass of this so that we inherit all this stuff. So that's easy. We're just going to go back to our Smash tweeters here, and instead of being a UI table view controller, I'm going to be a fetched results table view controller. Simple. So that's the easy way to become a fetch results controller delegate. Now, what was the next thing we need to do? We have to implement all of our UI table view data source methods using a fetched results controller. So there's 2 parts of that. One is we need to create a var, which is a fetched results controller. It's going to be a type NSFetched results controller. Teach me. And it's a fetch results controller that fetches Twitter users. Okay? So fetch results controller is also a generic type, and you have to say what kind of thing does it fetch. So I've got this var. How do I implement all those UI table view data source methods? Well, I could type them all in, but you know what? It's exactly the same in every single time you implement one of these. The code is exactly the same because fetch results controller always answers those questions in exactly the same way. So you could copy and paste it from some other app that you've done, or you could use this little beauty that I've created for you right here. Another little thing you can drag in, which we'll take a look. Copy that. And this is an extension that you can extend your class. So in this case, it's our Smash tweeters table view controller. And in this extension, it adds all the UI table view data source methods, see, and implements them in terms of your fetch results controller. Now this extension will not compile if you don't have a fetch results controller, because extensions can't add any storage themselves. So you have to have the storage be in your class. But this class does have a fetch results controller. Now, the one thing it doesn't implement here, though, is cell for row at, because cell for row at is specific to whatever data you're showing in your table. But even cell for row at, if we go back here and do cell for row at, let's do that. Cell for row at index path, or width. And of course, we know how to do that, right? Let the cell equal the table view, DQ, this one. And the identifier was Twitter user cell, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. and we want index path there. So I've got the cell. I'm going to return the cell. And in between, I need to load the cell up with its various information. Now, we set our cell to be, if you remember, a subtitle cell, right? This is subtitle cell. So we can set its text label and its detailed text label. So let's just start with just the text label. So I want to set the cell's text labels text basically equal to the Twitter user's handle. But I have to get the Twitter user that's in this row. Okay, how do I find the Twitter user that's in this row? I'm going to ask my fetched results controller. Let the Twitter user in this row equal my fetched results controller, which might be nil because it's an optional, object at index path. And since this could be nil, because this could be nil right here, let's do if let. Then we will update our cell. Now, if we didn't have a fetch results controller, by the way, if this were nil, our number of rows in section would be 0 all the time. This would never be called. So we could even put an exclamation point here. And maybe we should put an exclamation point here because this should never be called if this is nil. But anyway, so it's this very simple method. Object at is going to return you the thing of the type that it's controlling, which is Twitter user. If we look at the type here, you can see that's a Twitter user that goes at this index path, so that row in that section. So it could not be easier. And now we can just, in here, update whatever UI we want. No matter how complicated it is, we've got the Twitter user that's showing there, so we can get his handle, his username, whatever else we want to get on him, and put it in there. Everybody got that? Super simple, and yes, it is super simple. That's what's great about NSFetch Results Controller, is that really the amount of code we actually had to write here is absolutely tiny. Now there is one piece left, which is update UI. So when someone sets our mention or sets our database, we need to create a fetch results controller, obviously. This can't just be nil all the time. We actually have to create one, and we're just going to say fetch results controller equals a new NSFetch results controller, which is for Twitter users. And we will use this constructor right here. I'll go ahead and separate this out so you can see it a little better what the arguments are. You've seen this from the slide as well. Okay, so what are the 4 things we need? We need a request. Okay, I'll make a request. We need a context. All right, make a context. We need the name of the var in Twitter user that says the section title. Well, we don't have any sections. All our Twitter users are just going to be shown in one big long list, so that's nil. And we won't cache our results, although we could, because we're never going to change this request. It's all, so, well, actually, that's not true. We could change this because someone might bring up this MVC and then change the mention, and now we'd be changing the request to look for different Twitter users. So I think it's better not to cache this. Besides, the results hopefully are going to be fairly small. So I have to do request and context here. Let's do context first. I'm going to say if I can let my context equal my containers view context. Now this is very important right here to use view context, because this is a UI thing. And this fetch results controller is going to be working with our table view controller. That's all UI, so we want to do this all on the main queue. Okay, so you will have to use view context. You cannot do that background thing to create your fetch results controller. All right, so all that leaves is this request here. So I'm going to let the request. It's obviously going to be an NS fetch request for Twitter users. And we use this nice convenience thing here, Twitter user.fetch request. And so what does our request need? Well, our request needs sort descriptors. So we're going to have some array of sort descriptors. Our request also needs a predicate. Okay, oops, predicate format. Right here, this one. Okay, so we're going to have some format string there and then some args for the %@. Okay, so let's do the sort descriptor first. We're looking for all the Twitter users who have tweeted something that mentioned that search term in it. Let's order them by their handle, @ whatever. So all we need to do that is say ns sort descriptor with and we'll use the one with the key. It's going to make me type it. Okay, so we'll do the key handle, and we'll do ascending true. That's good enough. We'll just have it sort however it sorts. We'll come back to sorting later and look at it. All right, and we only need one sort descriptor. We're not going to sort by the handle and then subsort by something else, because the handle will be sufficient sorting in there. And what about our predicate? What Twitter users are we looking for here? This is really the key to making anything work. And for your homework, by the way, really this homework is not a lot of programming. It's a lot of thinking, and especially designing your schema so that this line of code right here is really simple. Okay? If you design your schema properly, you can make this quite simple. And it's all about thinking about what am I actually showing, okay, and how do I calculate what those things are. In this case, I'm showing all the Twitter users, any of the Twitter users actually here, whose tweets, the text in their tweets actually, contains, and we'll go case insensitively, that search term, okay, our mention, which is optional, so we better unwrap it. And if I'm going to unwrap this forcibly, I'm actually going to check to make sure it's not nil. Okay, just to be careful there. All right, so this is the predicate we want. We want any Twitter user, because we're looking for Twitter users, any Twitter user whose tweets, any of their tweets text contains this mention. This is actually, I probably said that a little wrong there. We're looking for any Twitter user here who have any of its tweets text contains this mention. That's what any means here. Any is saying any of the tweets texts contains this. Then show this Twitter user here. Okay? Everybody got all that? So now I've got my fetch request controller. Remember, the only two things I need to do now is to try to have my fetch results controller perform this fetch. Okay, that can throw, so that's why we're trying there. And then we got to tell our table view, okay, time to go call all your UI table view data source methods, and we know who's going to answer that extension that we had there, and it's going to ask the fetch results controller for all the information it needs. Right? By the way, notice I made this public, okay, internal, basically. That's because I put that extension over here in a different file, and it wouldn't be able to see this otherwise. So if you want to make this var private, which is not a bad idea actually, in a MVC that is using a fetch results controller, making its controller public is kind of opening up the internal guts of it. If you want to make this private, then you would just put this extension at the bottom of the file, in the same file. That way you'll be able to see it. All right, so hopefully we've remembered everything. Let's go give this a try. Luckily that warning went away that was up there. All right, so let's go here, hashtag Stanford again. All right, now I'm going to press tweeters, and it's going to segue to this new MVC that will hopefully show us a list of all the people who have tweeted here. And sure enough, there it is. These are all the people who have tweeted one of the tweets that was found by that search term, hashtag Stanford. It even has that listed at the top, which is kind of cool because that's the same as the back button here. Now, one thing I don't like about this, a couple of things. One, subtitle. Okay, that's no good. We could put something better there, like maybe we could put how many tweets they've tweeted that match that search term. That'd be cool. And then the other thing is the order it's in. Look at this, all the capital letters first, and then all the lowercase letters after it. I don't like that. I want it to just be alphabetical, case insensitive. So let's fix those two things. So the case insensitive is just a matter of sorting. Okay? We're sorting there, and it's sorting by some default. Well, the default is obviously case-sensitive search, and we don't want that. So this is where this sorting selector comes in, and we just say hashtag selector, and it's got to be an NS string selector because this is an NS string field. And there's quite a few of them. If you type compare, you'll get to see what they are. So there's localized, case-insensitive, these kind of things. So let's try case-insensitive. Let's do localized case-insensitive compare. So that's case-insensitive and using the user's local language to know what goes where, what the ordering is. So that's a pretty good one to use, localized case insensitive compare. So that's all we need to do to the case sensitivity. That was really easy. How about this thing of having the cell's detail text label have the Twitter count, basically the counter Twitter. So I'm going to say this equals Twitter, let's see, yeah, tweet count, tweets, and let's even be nice here and put an S if it's 1. Count equals 1, then we'll put an S on the end, otherwise nothing. Okay, already see what I did there? So it will say 1 tweet. What else do we do here? Let's do this, like that. Oops, no, this is probably okay, but all right. So I just want to make it look nice. 1 tweet, 2 tweets, 0 tweets. So how do I get this tweet count right here? I let tweet count equal something. And to do this, I'm going to do a little quick fast type code because we're getting close to the end here. So I have a method here called tweet count with mention by right here. And let's look at this method and how this works. So this is going to give the tweet count with mention by this Twitter user. Okay, the Twitter user that we got from our fetch results controller is going to give us the tweet count. And the way it's going to work is it's going to create a fetch for tweets. So here, even in the middle of my cell for row at index path, I'm making a request, perfectly valid, to go do a fetch request right in the middle here to find some information. So here I'm fetching for tweets this time because I want to count the number of tweets this Twitter user has tweeted with that search term. And the predicate is tell me all the tweets whose text contains that mention and whose tweeter is this Twitter user, right? Mention and the Twitter user. And I'm going to go ahead and force unwrap that because, boy, if I get all the way down to here, surely the mention is not nil. And then I'm going to return, I'm going to use the same context the Twitter user is in. Okay, hopefully that's a view context. And I'm going to count, use that count thing for that request. And if that fails for some reason, I'm going to say 0 tweets. Everybody got that? So let's go take a look. Right, hashtag Stanford. All right, here it is. Tweeters. Look at that, 1 tweet. 37 tweets by MEC30. Let's go see if we can find MEC30 in here. Sure, there's one by MEC30. Another one, sure enough. Look at this MEC. What the? Okay, what if I decide I don't want MEC30 in there anymore? I don't like this guy. He's a spammer or something. I don't know what his problem is, but I don't want him in there. Well, I can go back here and change my predicate right here to say I want all the tweets that have that, but I don't want ones where the handle of that guy, let's say it even begins with, just to be kind of interesting, MEC, what was it? MEC, we'll say. Okay, and we can't put this literal in here, so we have to say %, and then we put the MEC on the outside. Okay? So let's see if that got rid of Mr. MEC. He's gone. Okay, got that spammer out of there. No questions? Yes, question? Yeah, so the question is, are the tweets in the database, do they stay in there for run to run? And the answer is absolutely. That's what the core data is kind of all about, is a permanent database. So all those tweets, those hashtag Stanford tweets in there, if we go back in here and run again, and search for hashtag Stanford, if there have been some tweets since then, they'll be added, but every single tweet we ever got is still going to be in here. So you can see this list actually got slightly longer, a few tweets were in there, but all in there. So and we're uniquing them, so it's not adding them over and over, and you got to be careful to do that on your homework. Don't add them over and over. But yeah, that core data database is there. By the way, I'm going to show you a trick. Just enough time to show you something that's really cool. What if you want to delete your database? Okay? Now, there's two reasons you might want to delete your database. One, you want to clear the data out because you want to get a fresh set so you can see if things are working. And number two, you might change your data model. If I go back here and I go to my data model here and I add some attributes or add an entity, then my app will no longer run on that device or on the simulator, because it'll say your data model doesn't match the data that's already on this device. So here's the magic to get rid of it. It's not very magical. Is on your device or on the simulator, you go to the home button right here and you press and hold to make the things jiggle. You all know about that? That's how you delete apps. And just delete your app. Okay? And when you delete your app, your core data goes with it. And now when you run the next time, you're going to run, it's going to be a fresh database. It'll have the new data model, etc. So I'm very glad you asked that. It's really important to know how to clear out your database. Now if we do hashtag Trump or something. See, it's even asking me again, do I want to allow it? And I do. Okay? All right. That is it. I will see you next Wednesday after you turned in your homework, and we'll learn all about the final project and auto layout.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.